Welcome to the Corporate to Coach podcast. I'm Pamela, a former corporate professional turned certified life and business coach and mentor. If you're ready to sign clients, grow your soul-led coaching business, and shed the employee identity so you can step fully into business ownership, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Corporate to Coach podcast. I am very pleased to bring on today's special guest is Debbie Heiser, who is a founder of the Lit Up Life, where clarity becomes currency and alignment becomes a woman's greatest edge. She helps purpose-driven women reclaim their power, lead with confidence, and create sustainable success rooted in identity, alignment, and strategic action. I am so excited to dive into this discussion with Debbie today because she's an ex-corporate girly, just like many of us. In her corporate career, she initially started her side venture in 2014, and then she stepped fully into entrepreneurship in 2021. And during that transition, she scaled from consistent 5-figure annual revenue as a side business to, drumroll please, $250,000 in revenue within 18 months. And from our discussion just prior to hitting record, she's an author as well and still coaching one-to-one groups, masterminds, all the things. So this is going to be a really juicy discussion. Debbie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Pamela, for having me. I so appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes. Oh, you're so welcome. So I know I just gave the bio, but would you like to give a bit of an introduction about what you do with your clients and the work you're passionate to share with the world?
Yes. So before we hit record, you had asked me where I worked, and I started my career. Some people may or may not be familiar with the phone book or the yellow pages. And I started in that business. And the reason I bring that up is that my actual first real job was an entrepreneur. I taught piano lessons when I was in high school. And so I realized I had this entrepreneurial spirit. But when I sold yellow pages, I had a manager one time tell me, you're not selling yellow pages. You're helping clients with their hopes, wishes, and dreams. Because the more clients or customers you bring them, the more money they make, then they can go do the things they want to do. And I feel like I do the same thing today. It's just in a different modality. And that's with the coaching. And so I work in systems and structure. As all of you know, being in the corporate world, you have an opportunity to learn systems and structure. And so I work in that realm, but I also work in the neuroscience field and universal law field because it's important to have both. Some refer to it as the feminine and masculine energy, but making sure that we have both, because I can set up the best systems in the world. But if I keep hitting the same wall over and over again, and I can't figure out why I'm not doing the things that I want to do, and I'm frustrated, it doesn't matter how good my systems are. So both of those have to work in conjunction. And that's really what I do. And what I say really is that I help people make a lot of money, because ultimately, once we can get rid of some of those messages that we have in the neuroscience, then it's a matter of realizing what it is you really want. And so I help people get what they want.
Oh, I love this. And so do you work with, is it mostly women entrepreneurs, or is it women of all walks of life?
So my market is women entrepreneurs. However, I say that because about 10 to 15%, maybe 20% are men or men in corporate. So for instance, I'm coaching some physicians within a health organization here, because I did a speaking engagement there and they wanted me to do leadership. I teach a couple of leadership classes at a university called Gonzaga University here in the United States on leadership, and specifically servant leadership. And so that feeds my kind of soul to stay in some of that leadership piece of it, because you lead a business when you're an entrepreneur, but it looks very different in those different environments. So I do a small piece of helping people if they want a promotion or they want to understand how to lead people better in a position that they have in a corporate position. I do coach those folks as well, but predominantly entrepreneurs in a service-based industry.
Oh, I love this discussion. You've got my brain firing here, because when you said leadership looks so different in corporate as it does in your own business, you are so right. It's not something I've ever consciously directed my thoughts to, but It is so very true. I often speak about the difference between employee mindset and CEO mindset, entrepreneurship mindset. And that is a really great example that I don't think I've ever thought to even discuss before. But leadership looks really different in corporate. Often we're leading teams, managing large budgets, leading from the front. And often the clients I work with, they're all excellent leaders in their corporate roles. And then it comes to our own business and we struggle to self-lead. Is that how you see it as well? The differences with leadership in corporate versus leadership in entrepreneurship?
Yes. And particularly because a lot of entrepreneurs, they use contractors or what we consider to be contractors in the States, where they own their own business and we're paying them for the service, or just managing an employee or two that are actually supporting you to go do the work that you do best. And that looks very different. And the other part of leadership is when you're leading in a corporate, I say everything in life is a sales call because we're always influencing. Because when you're in corporate, you're influencing potentially, and it's usually someone else's vision, unless you're sitting at the executive table, which some people are, helping to create that vision. You're leading a vision that's owned by somebody else. So the accountability is there, but not to the point of where you're influencing people to work with you. Right? There's a very different piece. And depending on the type of business, if it's a product based, then you're selling the product. But when you're influencing people to work with you, people go through all sorts of messaging about who am I that somebody would pay me to work with me to do this? Or why should I be the one that someone does this? Or I need to go get that next certificate because we were taught in corporate, you have to have the certificate and you have to do the things to go out and coach or be the person that you're wanting to be in this business. So I find that the leadership, the biggest piece that's different is that really the business is usually more about the service they're providing. So it feels a lot more personal. And the accountability is all on them versus, oh, the corporate messaging didn't come out right, and not that people blame and justify, but just there's a different level of accountability. And when you're leading yourself, there's so many internal messages that get in the way.
Yeah. And I find it such an interesting irony that when we actually are a business owner, we get to define our own vision and therefore we're accountable to our own vision. Somehow it's harder. I don't know if I should generalize that thoroughly, but that has been what I've observed in myself, in my clients. It's the work I've had to overcome myself and why I'm so passionate about helping clients with this as well. And it sounds like you resonate. I mean, why would it be? Why does it happen that when we actually have our own vision and we're accountable to ourselves, that it gets so hard? And you said, we kind of get in our own way, like it is our own neuro wiring. Why is it easier to be accountable to someone else than ourselves? It's the age-old frustration that I think we all need to be more tender and more compassionate to ourselves about. And it's an interesting balance. I never want to say to someone, treat your business as if it was a job, because that's the very reason we're leaving corporate in the first place. We don't want it to feel like a job. Yet, so there is something about being accountable to someone else that means we get less in our own way about doing it. We just tend to show up for it. What do you think that major difference is?
Yeah. So just jotted down a couple of notes here because I want to make sure I talk to this. For me, what I find with people is the transition is a little bit difficult because of two things. One is people struggle with answering this question a lot of times. And this is the basis of why you do what you do, what you provide to people is how do you provide people more life? And if you can answer that question, then comes the passion. Then comes well, why wouldn't I go do this? And if I don't go do this, who will? It doesn't mean that, there's not other coaches out there. There's not other people out there, but really being able to answer that helps you in everything in your business. It answers the why. It keeps the passion strong and going. It keeps you motivated into doing the things that you don't necessarily want to do. And the second thing is that we have bought into this message that we manage time. And we don't manage time, we manage energy. And if more people looked at what's bringing me energy and what's not bringing me energy, and remove more of the things that take energy from you and look at where are you gaining. The same thing. I just did an event called From Hello to Hell Yes, where we looked at and said, okay, if I'm building awareness and trying to generate leads in the business, we started with, how do you help people have more life? I help people with their hopes, wishes, and dreams. I help them accomplish what they wanted to do. And because we live in a 3D world, part of that is about making money. Mm-hmm. And not being ashamed of making money. So getting rid of all of those stories that we have about money. And so that, and the fact that when you are doing something you're passionate about and doing something that you know is helping someone have more life, have a better life, then you can get into the flow. And when I say flow, hopefully you've had this experience. I think you probably have, where you're doing something and you lose track of time because you just love doing it so much and it's so much fun and you're enjoying it. And yeah, are there things that it's like, I need to do this piece over here and it's not my favorite thing, but I'll get to that. Like, that's what I mean by flow. And when you're passionate about something, then you're managing your energy and you become a little bit more specific about what's taking energy and not being in that space as much.
I love this. And I'm curious to know. So I'm always, I hate to do this to you. I'm going to challenge you here.
No, that's fine.
I'm always thinking from this sounds amazing, but in reality, what does this look like? So you gave the example of leads, which is fantastic. We all need leads in our business. Some people like that language. For those who don't know what leads are, it's basically having, some other people call it prospects. It's having people in your audience that could potentially become clients. So finding those people and bringing them into your ecosystem and then having a method to convert them. So what if somebody is like, well, the idea of doing that just feels hard, or there's no one in my audience? Like, how do you help someone go from either, sometimes it's a skill and like a knowledge thing. So let's just assume we're working with people who knows what it is and they know their method of doing it. Is it as simple as just changing the strategy? Could you not always just end up finding yourself changing the method constantly and using the guise of, well, it's taking my energy, so I just need to change it? Like, how do you balance the stick with the thing, learn how to do it, develop the skill set? And I always say with a stronger skill set, you tend to have stronger enjoyment with something.
Yeah.
But assuming there's a skill set and it's taking your energy, then what?
Yeah. So I'm going to go into this with this lead generation piece. So many times what I find is that small business owners dislike social media. Yes. Now, they don't dislike social media itself. They dislike what they need to do in social media to garner leads, right? Yeah. So how I start out in this event, I'm actually going to take it online next year in 2027, is the same way. Awareness, like first start out and figure out, how do you bring people more life? Because a lot of times you don't talk about that question. But then, okay, well, let's set social media aside for a minute. What do you love to do? I know I love to speak. I love to go to conferences. I love to meet interesting people. So I love to be guests on podcasts. I love to go out and just meet people because I am so interested in people and their stories. So I put myself in positions to go to things that put me in rooms. That's a big piece of how I generate leads. Now, because I generate leads, and in today's environment, social media is a piece of that sales conversation. I used to block off 2 hours every day just to connect with people, and I had a list of 100 people. That's how I built my business from a 5-figure to $250,000 in 18 months. A list of 100 people, and I was on the phone, DMing, texting 2 hours a day, having coffee with people, whatever the case would be. It's about finding the things you enjoy doing that get people to experience you, that get you into those positions to be around other people, whether it be an online networking group, whatever it is that you find joy in. Because then you'll start to adopt and say, oh yeah, I need to do some things out here. And then honestly, hire somebody to do that. I have a marketing team that works on my marketing. And frankly, I have to check my posts every night because I'll have people say, oh, that post was so good. And I'm like, oh, they did a great job. I need to go see what they wrote. And I'm responding to people. And I look at that now as part of my strategy. But then what I do is in this particular event, I taught them some AI. I gave them some prompts, showed them how it could be fun, showed them how they could do some things that's inspiring, how they could create a little bit of a steady drumbeat and some tips and techniques. Because to your point, they didn't have the knowledge or the skill. to go do it. And therefore they disliked it because they didn't look at it as fun. So that's an example of where I would say it doesn't bring me energy. Okay, well then quit fighting it. Don't go do the social media. I had a client that hated it and she resisted it and resisted it. We talked about the resistance and there was part of it about her being visible. So I don't let people just off the hook with that. But ultimately, it took more energy for her to resist it. And I was like, forget it. Just go sign up and go be a part of these networking groups right now. Because right now, she just had to get to the point where she felt comfortable explaining to people what she did. So it kind of depends on where people are at in their journey of what I would tell them. But that's an example for you of like a real world kind of situation in that.
Yeah.
Another piece would be, I was a CFO for a small business. I know how to do all my finances and my bookkeeping. Do I want to spend an hour to 2 hours every month reconciling my credit cards and my bank statements and all of the things that go with that? I can do it, but I can make a whole hell of a lot more money. Oh, sorry, I didn't ask. Sometimes that comes out of my mouth. Sorry. I can make a whole heck of a lot more money in those 2 hours doing what I do best. And so therefore I'm going to pay somebody to do that for me. Right. So, and sometimes there's a fear when you're in business on your own and you're a small business of when is that crux of when is the time to hire someone? And if it's stopping you, like I hired somebody to do my website when I very first started because I knew I could do it. I could figure it out. I was smart, but I didn't want to. And I kept resisting doing it because of that reason. Now, I didn't need a website. I built my business without a website, but I knew if I got larger, people would need a place to go to find out about me. And so if something is stopping you, then look at it as an investment, not as, it's going to cost me something. And when we're in corporate, we're used to security. We're used to that W-2 paycheck, or in the United States, we call it a W-2 for taxes, right? Like we're used to that paycheck that comes every 2 weeks or monthly or however you're paid. And there's a level of security with that. When you're an entrepreneur, you manage your money differently. Because depending on the type of business you're in, my business, I know that when I have events a couple of times a year, my income goes up. Otherwise, it's more steady throughout the year because I've done some things to make it a little bit more steady. So sometimes we have these double binds that say, I can't go do this because I don't like it, when in fact, it's really visibility on social media. We say, oh, we don't want to start a business because ultimately we don't understand this because it's our subconscious. We desire security more than we desire starting the business. So therefore, it's a double bind and it binds us and we don't move forward until we release that and understand there's just a different way to manage the money if it's security, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you said.
So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it did. It did. And I love what you said about the double bind. For what I see a lot with the clients I work with in the audience I have here is it's the bind of comfort versus wanting to go as big or be as audacious, be as visible as they desire to be secretly, often, and even outwardly. And yet their comfort with the salary, the cadence that and the rhythm that they've created with the little visibility that they've started. It's very easy to form a habit very, very quickly. Like, it's so interesting. People say, oh, it takes 21 days to build a habit. It takes 3 months to build a habit. They say mastery takes 10,000 hours. Ironically, anything that we are doing for, let's just say it's 21 days, anything we've done for 21 days in a row or longer. So if you've been in business for longer than 3 weeks and you've been posting and that's the rhythm that you've got into, you have a habit of that already. And so you've already built comfort with the level of visibility you have, the frequency that you actually sell, regardless of how visible you are. If you're selling within that visibility, you've built comfort with the salary that you have for those that are wanting to make that transition, or if you're full-time and trying to stay out of the 9 to 5 and having to go back to make money, whatever rhythm you're in at the moment in your business, that is a rhythm of habitual visibility, selling, whatever it is in your business that you currently have, you're comfortable there. That double bind of comfort versus the expansion versus the money that you want to make. That for me is the biggest challenge that I support my clients to overcome. And something that we spoke about before we hit record was the identity and the sovereignty piece. And I would love to expand on that as well, because there is skill set. There is connecting to what energetically lights you up and depletes you and adjusting accordingly. Where do you see identity sits in and fits in with that?
Well, what happens there is, as you were talking with the comfort, we all have beliefs. And these beliefs, when you think about neuroscience, and I'm going to do just a really quick, high level overview of neuroscience. You have a conscious brain and a subconscious brain. Your conscious brain can create and innovate. It can take on messages and it can deflect messages. Your subconscious brain can't deflect messages. Mm-hmm. It can only receive those messages. So we develop messages, and I'm sure you know some of this too and have talked about these before, but you develop messages between early childhood development of 0 to 7 years of age. So there's things that you learn to fit in with your tribe, to do things that ultimately stick with us. And then we continue to get messages throughout our lives. And what happens is those subconscious messages create beliefs that we have. The beliefs tied with emotion are what creates our identity. And our identity then determines what actions we will take and what habits we then create. So if we want to break a habit or we want to create a new habit, we have to uncover what the belief is that's stopping us or what belief we don't have yet to get to that habit. So a lot of times what I find is not only the comfort, which is a double bind, but there's also these things called loyalty pacts. So I'll give you an example. I was still working as a CFO. I was doing this as a side gig because I figured, I have 5 hours a week that I get lunch. So I'll kind of do some of that and then I'll do it at night and on the weekends.
I love that.
Yeah. And so then as I was doing that, I found it took a coach to help me see that part of my fear was my mom passed away of breast cancer at the age of 58. And she swore that it was because of taking non-bioidentical hormones and the stress of owning her own business. Mm. So your brain is designed to predict and protect, always. Predict and protect, predict and protect. So if you have a fear of something, the more you do it and build evidence in your brain that you're safe, the more likely you'll do the thing. So it took her helping me see that I had a loyalty pact with my mother because in my subconscious brain, if I owned a business and didn't die from having this business, I was saying she was wrong. That's how our subconscious works. When in fact, that was her story, not my story. Right? And so we make these binds with people. It can be a spouse, it can be a parent, somebody that's trusted that we love that has a belief about something. We then take on and don't want to disappoint. We don't want to, make them wrong. And so therefore we won't step into the thing. So all of those types of things are what I find we have to unwind and untether from in order to then be able to go do the thing that we want to go do. So the visibility piece, why is it so scary to be visible? Well, it's in our DNA because even centuries ago, if you were kicked out of the tribe, you died.
Absolutely.
Right? You didn't live. So there are some DNA things that even get passed down. I say here in the States or even in Europe, most of us have a scarcity mindset. And somewhere we have scarcity beliefs about money because in the United States, they lived through the Great Depression. Our grandparents or parents or great-grandparents lived through what we called the Dust Bowl or the Great Depression. In Europe, it was World War II. In other countries, it was a Revolutionary War. Whatever it was that created scarcity, those messages are passed down generationally, just like stories of our heritage are passed down. And so it's about becoming aware. So really, for me, I think a big key piece, as you were saying, you see so many people want that comfort, is helping them become aware. Because once you become aware, you can't go back.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that, especially about your mum. I have had a number of clients recently who have had experiences of parents who were business owners. Yeah. Both my parents worked in standard 9-to-5 jobs. So that's not my story, but I see this a lot with clients. And it's interesting how you said the beliefs that we've adopted from our parents. And something that I've really appreciated at unpacking with my clients recently have been looking at the circumstances and the unraveling of events that their parents experienced and the beliefs that they made that mean. Because especially when those parents are no longer with us, they don't always have the opportunity. And often, even if they are still around, when they have been able to actually have a discussion with them, their experience of that set of events is entirely different to the 9-year-old or 7-year-old or 5-year-old that had to witness that. And this is the thing with beliefs, right? We know this with our own stories, and we see this with what we witness from our upbringing. There's a set of events and circumstances, and they're always neutral, even when the majority would agree that they're terrible events. But what we make that mean in the unique way that we interpret those events, and they become those beliefs, because that's how we process the world, right? We don't separate ourselves from the world from the ages of 0 to 7. And anything that happens to us in that time is us. Like, there is no separation. So we can witness events that are generically neutral. We can witness events that the majority would agree are tragic or challenging or difficult. And we can also witness events that are beautiful and brilliant and magical. And it's always what we make that mean. And when, like you say, the awareness is powerful. And the one thing I always hear is, oh, I've worked through that before. I thought I've dealt with that. And it's every time that comes up, I'm like, yes. And have you ever been at this level of business before? Have you ever done this in your life before? Have you ever been this visible or this audacious, this expanded? Have you ever created in this way before? So of course, if you're doing new things in your life, in your business, then old stories are going to show themselves in these new stories. And often it's a remembering when you've done the work and you know you've done the work. But that's where the compassion piece is so important, I think, as well.
Absolutely. And I think we, at least in the United States, a lot of times we are given promotions or we're awarded based on what we produce. And so many times it's about looking at who we're being versus doing. Because if we're being and we're in alignment with who we're being and we know how we provide more life and those types of things, the doing happens because we're so used to being in that mode of doing. And it's interesting because as you're talking about that and thinking about how I always tell people, I joke and say it's job security, right? Because it's just layers. It does show up. And I have a support team. I know now when I start to expand, and it happens more frequently now than it did years ago because I'm more open to it. Some expansion, I'm like, I got this, and bring it because I know what's coming on the other side is going to be marvelous. But I have a support team. When I have a huge leveling up, I have a counselor that I go see. I go and make sure I'm practicing my gratitude. I have friends that I call upon that I mastermind with some gals that, we went to Paris together years ago and still mastermind in our business. And I'll call on those people and say, okay, I'm feeling a shift, a big leveling up. Here's what I need from you, because I can't expect them to read my mind. And I become more aware. I'll give you an example just recently. So my story is always about time, right? Because when you're in corporate, you're tied to time instead of energy. So when I know that I am starting to feel a little bit of like stress and I don't do overwhelm, I'll go back to my time story. And so I just had a recent conversation with my coach. And part of what I'm looking at is I've been divorced now for 6.5 years. And I've said, I'm open to dating. So I've been purging things at my house because I think I filled every space hoping my ex-husband wouldn't come back, right? Like just mentally. And so mentally, I did that. Like my closet was so full, I couldn't even find clothing. And so I've spent all this time purging all of these things, and I'm still purging. But then what I found is if somebody asked me on a date, I couldn't go until July. And this is early June that we're talking because I've filled my schedule so much, right? So then my mind is saying, oh yeah, here it happens again. So it's just that layer. And it was like, oh, wow. Isn't that interesting how that's showing up again? Right. And I know for myself, when I feel scarcity, my mother grew up very, very poor. And so I know when I'm feeling scarce, my refrigerator is so full of food and there is no way me as one person could eat all of that food. And it's just a subconscious thing that I do. And it's not conscious, It's more conscious now, and I'll catch myself even at the grocery store going, wait a minute, I don't need the 4-pound bag of lettuce. That's not going to happen I'm not going to eat 4 pounds of lettuce in a week. And so that's a lot of lettuce to be 4 pounds. And so there are things that as people are working through things, just start to notice those patterns.
Yeah. And what you said about having that support network and being able to lean into all of the different types of support, whether it's counseling, therapy, your coach, your business besties, even friends outside of the business realm, just friends and family that aren't connected to business. All of these things are powerful, but the awareness is everything, right? And we need that expert who understands our world, that is on our side, and that space to be able to think out loud. Because I find even as we do this for other people. Every coach I work with is a coach for their clients, and yet they get to be the client too. And I think that's a really important thing, that we have to give ourselves permission to receive help.
Absolutely.
And there's importance, I think, from the embodiment perspective as well. When we are selling coaching, and anybody who's selling, right, actively selling, especially one-to-one or intimate masterminds or even group counts, if there's a coaching aspect to it, the more in integrity you can be with the joy and power of being coached and the transformations you get of just having time to brain dump and then organize and make sense of and come back to awareness and find your power and transform what you need to transform, and then leave a session that little bit lighter. When you can have a lived experience of that's current, there is nothing like that to have you step into your integrity when you are then trying to sell the very same thing.
Absolutely.
And to me, it's a no-brainer.
And I think too, for me, this is a belief I have as a coach. It's just as important for me to be coached, to constantly be learning, and to have someone else, because the more self-aware I am, then the more I can help other people. Because it's like a horse, and, a lot of times they'll put blinders on the side of a horse so that they don't see to the side. And it's almost like we have little blinders on that because we're too close to our own things. The same thing why counselors go to other counselors, and, the same thing with a coach. We're too close to our own identities. We're too close to our own business. And so it's helpful to have another set of eyes on it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I always say you wouldn't expect a heart surgeon to do their own heart surgery.
Absolutely. That's
right.
Fantastic. And I get the impression from you, not knowing you completely until we just started to talk earlier, is, Pamela, that you also, I tell people, borrow the belief I have in you when you don't believe it yourself. Because I wouldn't work with people if I didn't believe in what they're doing. Like, if I think their business model is not something that's going to work, I'm not going to outright tell them that, because I don't want to put a message in their head that's my message, because they could totally prove me wrong. But I'll say, you know what, I'm probably not the coach for you. And here's a couple of numbers of some people I know, but I only work with people I believe in. And what they're doing. And so I just remind people, if you're not believing in yourself, just borrow some of the belief I have. And I get the impression you have the same thing, that you believe.
I love that philosophy, actually. Yeah. And it's important from an investment perspective as well. I've had an experience like that as a client just this week, and I'll share a bit of the story. So I'm in a coach's container of it's like a 7-day beginner into the 3-month group program that she's selling. And I love her energy. I believe in her, but I don't believe in her strategy. She's very heavy on DMing and using the DMs and leveraging the DMs. And it works. That's how she got me in. And that's incredible for her. And it's something I choose not to do. And I don't want to weaponize it. And I refuse to, because as a business coach, I know I have influence in supporting other coaches figure out what works for them. But there's a difference between what works for you versus choices that you just desire not to make, such as leveraging DMs as a strategy. I'm just using DMs as an example because it's front of mind, but also because it does get demonized a lot. And I don't think DMs in and of themselves are bad. Some people approach them in ways that are just yuck. And you receive those DMs from appointment setters and bro marketers, and it's just cringe. And that's a strategy that I dislike, but I don't need to just yuck someone else's yum. But this particular coach If I was going to do DMs, I'd probably do it the way she does. I choose not to, and I don't desire to. So even though I could get so much benefit from investing in her program, from the energetics that she has to share and the belief that she holds, the strategy that she's selling is ultimately not in alignment. So I'm not going to invest in that. And I think there's so much sovereignty and power when we remember that we get to make those choices for ourselves and for our own business. And it doesn't mean we're making anyone else wrong. And we don't have to weaponize or demonize anyone else. We can build the business exactly as we like. And that just gets to be us in our power, standing shoulder to shoulder with someone else in their power, even if their strategy is entirely different. And I don't think I've spoken to anyone who disagrees with that. I think it's more an awareness that they can step into powerfully, and then feel powerful as they move forward in their business, instead of a lot of comparison and a lot of pedestaling and a lot of shoulding on ourselves, which I find is really easy to do when we're solo women entrepreneurs trying to find our way in building our own coaching business.
Yes, a lot of comparison. And I always talk about know what you're available for and what you're not available for. And then what I find with women is we tend to say more than what we need to say. Mm-hmm. So if someone asks me to do something and it's not something I really want to do, nor do I see it as something that's in alignment, I will say, Pamela, thank you so much for asking me. I'm honored that you asked me. I'm just not available right now for that. And that's it. I don't have to say because I've got this and this and this going on, or because I have a travel schedule, or because I don't have to go into justifying why I'm saying I'm not available. And I find women, particularly in the United States, I'm not as sure in Australia, but we tend to feel like we have to explain ourselves as to why that is. And so I'm just finding the more and more, complimenting it. It's not, there's no judgment involved in it. It's just more of, hey, that sounds fantastic, but I'm just not available for it. I kind of talk about us like as a vase, and, we have this unending supply coming into our vase. And when we accept things or do things that we don't really want to do, we're pouring out that energy, and we cut off the supply. And usually then we end up depleted. Ooh. And we become resentful, and we don't want to do the thing. And so then we get angry, and all of these emotions come up, and that affects our energy, and our vibration lowers. So then we're attracting lower vibrational things that we don't want. Where when we stand tall and we know what we're available for and what we're not available for. Now, don't get me wrong. We sometimes poke holes in that vase with our imposter syndrome or the beliefs that we have, but it's a much slower leak. When we can stand tall, then people get our overflow. And that feels much different than when I feel obligated to go do something. But a big piece of that is realizing how to communicate that in a way that we don't feel guilt or shame for not helping or anything, because a lot of times in cultures or religion, it's better to give than it is to receive. And all of those types of messages where in fact, you can receive and not be narcissistic. You can receive and not be selfish. I'm very specific about who I surround myself with. And it has nothing to do with me being, I don't know what even the word would be, but it's more of, I know what feeds me, and I know how I can be of service to those people. And I know that by having those people in my life, I show up at my best self, because really I'm only responsible to show up as my best self for other people. I'm not responsible for them. I'm responsible to them. And there's a big difference in that.
I love that distinction. And I love the example of the vase. I could really visualize that as you were describing it. Yeah. And one thing I definitely have noticed, especially in myself over the last couple of weeks, is when it comes to prioritizing your alignment and what is true for you, I do want to warn the audience, it doesn't always feel comfortable. So saying no and actually and I have a really great example of this, actually. I received a beautiful message from a coach that I know kind of well, and she messaged me a lovely DMs again. She messaged me a lovely DM saying, hey, I'm doing this thing. I thought of you. Would you like to have it for free? And I was an immediate no in my body. And so I acted accordingly. And I said, thank you so much. Like you said, I appreciate the message. And it's a no from me. And then I paused and I was like, oh, do I say why? Should I say more? And I had to just sit with the discomfort of that for a second. And then I was, oh God, how is she going to feel? Is she going to feel rejected? And then the people pleasing and lots came up. And it wasn't just a straight cut, oh, how lovely, but no, and off it goes. It was only like maybe 2 minutes of my life, but
Sure.
I really noticed the internal dialogue. And then, of course, me being me, I saw it and I was like, oh, I don't need to do any of that. The message is fine. And I sent the message. And then as soon as I sent it, the discomfort continued for a second. And I was like, okay, I can feel discomfort. And I choose my alignment. I choose not to bullshit her. I choose not to waste both our time by pretending I'm a yes when really I'm no. I choose to be true to myself. And ultimately, I like that version of me better than the version of me who people pleases, even if that was more comfortable in that moment. Or it was more comfortable for me I couldn't even pretend to go there, so I didn't. But for some of our listeners, there will be a version of you that's more comfortable people pleasing and acting accordingly than pulling back and trusting in yourself and staying with that alignment. And that is an uncomfortable process. Even for me, who typically as an action, if you were to observe me in my life, I rarely people please. It's not been a massive thing I've had to work through. But in my internal world, I'm clearly not perfect with it, because if I was, it would have just been, oh, how lovely, not for me. And that was it. I'm not there yet, but I can see that shift.
A lot of times it's culturally, right? Like we're taught culturally to do that. I even found that in corporate. There's a book, it's older, and it's called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. And it talks about how a man would go in and say, I need 2 weeks of vacation. Bam. A woman would go in and say, I need 2 weeks of vacation because I need to take care of my mother-in-law. She's sick and I need to go do the, and then that's what creates judgment, because then the person on the other side of the table is judging what that person is going to do with their time off versus I just need the time off. And frankly, most of the time people don't care, right? Like they really don't want to know all of those details. Right. And what I've found is that because of some of the history and some of the culture that we live in, that is ingrained, and there's guilt and shame that comes in with that. But ultimately, you don't want to have, my best friend and I made this up, we call it compassion deficit disorder, CDD. You don't want to have compassion deficit disorder.
I love that.
But we also, I know, right? But we also don't need to justify, and you can still do that. That's why I don't love the word boundaries, because there are times that we need to set up a wall. Like there are some things that we need to do that. But for the most part, what I find that people really want to say with a boundary is they want to hold a commitment to themselves. And so if we say that we were going to set up a boundary, then we get all nervous and our energy changes, and then the energy exchange changes because we're nervous and it all gets wonky. Where if I know what I'm available for and what I'm not available for, then I can have a much more adult, kind of mature adult conversation, and my adolescent in my head doesn't come out more frequently.
Yeah.
And so then I can say, Pamela, I love this, and this is great stuff, and I'm really glad that's working for you. I'm just not available for that right now. I'll keep my ears open for somebody that might resonate with the strategy and send them your way, but it's just, I'm not available. I learned that when I got divorced, because I found so many people came out of the woodwork and wanted to know the story behind it. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is when you come up with something that shuts the conversation down, not in a rude way. So I would just say, they'd be like, what happened? And I'm like, sometimes things just don't work out. And then there's not an opening for anything else to happen. When you say, you know what, I'm so glad that's working for you, or thank you for thinking of me, but I'm just not available for that right now. And you can say right now, if you want them to ask again, or you can just say, I'm just not available for that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
So whatever that feels good. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing the story, especially with the divorce piece. And it gets to be with anything. It can be something trivial
Absolutely.
like a DM. It can be something with major events. You get to decide ahead of time how you want people to treat you. And you said it was a commitment to self. When you said that, my brain offered standard. I like to hold a standard of how I move in the world, how I like to feel in the world, and how I like to engage with people so that they can engage with me to the highest standard as well. And it helps other people rise. It helps other people
Absolutely.
be more empowered.
And I love that. I'm going to steal that, Pamela.
Yeah, I'm stealing so much from you today.
Well, I love that CDD. I know, right? And part of why I use the word commitment is because we are taught, particularly as women, not to trust our intuition. And because of that, the more commitments I follow through on for myself, the more and more I internally trust myself. And then that helps me then set a standard, because many of the women I start working with, their standard is so low, immediately they get a raise because they're not charging what they need to be charging. And they set a standard so low, they don't know how to set a higher standard. You talk knowledge and skill, and because they have other confidence and motivation issues in there too, with all of the messaging that comes through, by holding those commitments to themselves, then they're like, oh yeah, I do trust myself. Sometimes testing the universe and doing things, the reticular activating system. Oh, I'm going to say that I'm going to see green cars today. Well, all of a sudden you start seeing a gazillion green cars because you've activated that. And so then getting to that, then they can raise the standard and maintain that standard for themselves versus the neurobiology. I use water buffalo as an example. They go to the same watering hole. And so they've made a crevice, and that's the same thing within our brain. Mm-hmm. So once we decide to do it differently, there's no path. So we create the path and we go on that path for a few days to the watering hole. And then our brain goes, oh, you're going to die. Predict and protect, predict and protect. And we go back to the same neural pathway. And then we go back to that trail. And until we make a groove in our neural pathways, until that feels comfortable and familiar, then we want to always go back to what feels safe. I always use the example, I'm afraid of heights. When I got divorced, I jumped out of an airplane because it was like a freedom thing. And honestly, it was the closest I'd been strapped to a really hot 30-year-old in a long time, right? Because I did it in tandem. But I purposefully go do this one particular hike because it has this bridge that goes up over a railroad station, and it's graded so you can see through it, and it takes my breath away. The more and more I do things to show my brain that I'm safe, doing things and things that normally made me afraid, the less afraid I am every time I go, the less physiological response that I have, because really the body knows better than our head. Mm-hmm. And so the more and more you do those things, the easier it becomes.
I love this. Is there anything in your business that you've really worked on building that self-trust and building that muscle of self-trust?
I would say the whole business, really, because whether it was starting out in corporate and thinking I had to work the 8 to 5, time frame, that I didn't have the flexibility, to offering up new offerings, to even, just recently doing this event about the marketing arc. I don't know marketing. I pay someone to do marketing. But what I wanted to show people is what I've learned so that they don't have the pain points that I had learning what I learned as a small business owner. Hiring someone to do marketing doesn't mean I just pass it over to them and they do it all. I still have to do some things on social media. I still need to go show up at events. I still need to do those things. And so I would say that happens like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, exactly.
Anytime you're doing something new, anytime, and so to me, it's fun because it's like this practice.
Yeah.
Just like yoga, it's a practice. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I love how for you, it was just like the whole thing is, and it's true. I see this with a lot of coaches I work with. Half the time, we're not realizing just how epic it is that we are building a business, and we don't give ourselves that credit and that recognition. And when we do, and we start to look at what we have achieved, we look at the gap versus the gain. When you look at the gain instead of the gap, and so many coaches that I work with do this, they're like, I'm not there yet. I should be further along. I haven't hit the 100K or the 10K months.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at the gain. Where did you start? Did you ever create in this way? Did you ever coach in this way? Like where is the gain here? And when you can start to look at that, it's why I'm such a pennant for celebrating. Every time my clients in my one-to-one programs, every Friday, I'm like, right, what's happened this week? What have you done? Internal shifts, external shifts, tangible results, all of it. Bring it to the table. Because you said about the RAS and that green car, we have to do that with our wins, the internal shifts, because otherwise our brain will discount it. We'll only look at the gap. We'll only look at what we don't have or how far we are or the comparison or the pedestaling. And we won't realize that we are, if we're in it, we're doing it. And that is powerful, and that needs recognition.
Absolutely. And Pamela, kind of two things on that. One of the things is that when I find people are shitting on themselves, they're in their critical parent, or they're saying, and they're comparing and say, well, I should be here and I need to be doing the 10K months or whatever. I'm always like, according to whom? Like, we're putting expectations on ourselves, and who's putting the expectation? Nobody else is. We are. And so then it's a matter of coming back into alignment. And earlier you were talking about something too, and about how like then people go into this questioning. And even in this situation, when they're saying they should be in a certain way, it lowers your vibration. And the only thing that we need to do, and you were doing it and holding it so well in the story that you were talking about earlier, is you held the vibration as saying it's not for me. And our only role is to be the person that we want to be and hold that vibration. Don't lower it to meet somebody else where they're at. Stay here and allow them the opportunity to move up in vibration. You know, it's funny, and people look at me and they're like, what does that really mean? Well, as an example, someone was asking me the other day, like, now that you're open to dating, what are you looking for? And I only have kind of two things on like a list. Part of that is the political environment that we're in here, and that's never been a part of it before. But is really, I have to figure out, who do I want to be in a relationship? Because then I need to hold that vibration. Because if I'm holding that vibration, that person's going to come in. Yeah. If I'm not holding that vibration, we're going to pass each other. So really, our only job is to figure out who is it that we want to be, because then the doing part of that will figure itself out. But who do I want to be? And then hold that vibration.
Oh, I love this example. For dating, I couldn't agree more. You've got to hold, and even like, I'm recently married, and I'm finding even in this long-term relationship, I've got to be the wife, the home maker. Is that the word that I want to create in a partnership? But I get to hold that standard. I can't be asking something of him that I'm not willing to hold for myself. And that gets to be a joyous thing. And in our business, I was just having this discussion with a client yesterday. We were looking at the old stories and the old beliefs that were coming up. And we were looking at the stories and the beliefs were coming up. But then it was like, what if that's just an old story and an old belief? It's an identity that is there currently, but we're no longer available for. And it's not just looking at, well, how do I want to feel about marketing? Or how do I want to feel about sales? Or how do I want to feel about visibility? Or how do I want to feel about dating? It's, who am I becoming? What am I holding a standard for? What am I committing to? What does that look like in my habits? What does that look like in the stories I tell myself? It then trickles down. And Absolutely. Then the what you do, like you said just now, it takes care of itself. And this is so true in every area of your life. And one of the things I love doing is looking at an area of your life where you kind of do it naturally, or it's already very embodied and it's very much in a place where you're very satisfied and very happy. And then looking at that as a kind of benchmark of possibility, of proof, of capability, and then saying, how can I leverage that? How can I leverage that evidence in this area of my life? So I always say how you do one thing is how you do everything, to a point. This is almost the opposite. There's going to be something in your life that you do naturally really well, that there is something that you show up for. And if possible, don't use the job as an example, because the energetics behind that are quite different. But is there anything else in your life that you really do show up with the embodiment, the integrity, the belief, the standards, the commitments, the habits? Where is that locked in? And where can we bring that as evidence to yourself that you can achieve this, which I have a lot of fun with.
Camilla, you bring up something, because it's also really important to understand that what you want and who you want to be, you already are, or you wouldn't recognize it.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
And so that's the quantum time thing, right? Like, you can jump time, because when you are thinking ahead, then that says that it's missing today, when in fact it's not. You are already that, or you wouldn't recognize that that's who you want to be. I do a really powerful meditation in a lot of my programs about thinking about a movie theater that, and walking in and seeing yourself up on that movie theater of this woman that you want to be. And really having people embody it. Like, they go up on the stage, put their feet, like zip up the skin like a wetsuit, like they're going to surf. And it's like they're in that body, because the body knows better. The heart and the body are much more intelligent than our brains. And so I think a lot of times what I've found over time is that this whole idea of embodiment, and you've said that a couple of times, like feeling. And when I say feeling, I don't mean the emotion. I'm talking about like where you feel it in your body and understanding what that feels like is an anchor for people to go back to, so that when they start to want to lower their vibration or when they want to like shy away from something, they can remember what it felt like when they were doing the thing and anchor into that and go back to that. So I have them enter into that woman's body and be in that body for a little while and ask them to notice what they're doing. Are they surrounded by people? All of these things. And then I have them come back out of it. Now, when I'm working with someone privately, sometimes I'll ask them to stay in that, because then that's an up level right away that happens. So that then when they find themselves getting nervous about doing the thing or feeling the imposter syndrome or feeling the fear of being visible or any kind of fear, which is really false evidence appearing real, that they can remind themselves what it feels like. You know, a lot of times, and this kind of jumps into then setting goals, because I have them feel into what that feels like. Many times, and in the States anyway, we were taught to write goals, and really the goals were tasks. And I talk about having a big, juicy goal. So for me, where I live at the base of a mountain, I'm an avid downhill skier, and I want to be able to ski. I want to get the free pass that our mountain gives when you turn 80. And I want to be able to ski, not just get the free pass and go up to the mountain and hang out. So if I want to ski when I'm 80, and the reason that's there, people are like, well, why isn't it that you don't want to hang out with your grandsons? Well, in 20 some odd years, my grandsons are going to be adults. They're not going to be on the floor playing with me, right? Like, so, and I don't know what that feels like 20 years from now. I know what it feels like to ski. So hence it motivates me to do things differently in how I feed myself, how I take care of myself physically, how I take care of myself mentally, emotionally, because I want to be of sound mind and body so that I can ski when I'm in my 80s. So there's like, as you look at all of those things, I don't know where I was going with that other than you have to embody and know what that feels like in your body. Because when you do, I have a ring that I normally wear. I don't know why I don't have it on right now, but I usually tap that ring, or I'll take it off and change fingers when I'm shifting something. Or I'll say I need to shift my perspective and I take my glasses off and physically put them back on as a physical reminder to change what's happening, right? Change the pattern, change the water buffalo going to the same watering hole.
Thank you for sharing those examples as well of the glasses and the ring. I might try that on for size this week, actually. That's a really great idea. The piece about when you're 80 and you want to ski. I've never thought of that before. And it's now there. Thank you for gifting that to me and my audience. I absolutely love that. And I see that for you. I love it. I can't wait to see you when you're 80 with that. Oh my God, how good. And I'm conscious of time. Oh my gosh, I feel like we could talk for ages. We're so on similar wavelengths. Before we hit record, you wanted to talk about sovereignty. And I think the bedrock of everything we've spoke about, if everything we've spoke about is happening, you're in your sovereignty from my perspective. But I know we could also probably do a whole podcast episode on that. Maybe we could do round 2 sometime next year. But what do you want to say about sovereignty before we wrap up today?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Pamela, because really I do feel like everything that we've talked about is about owning the powerful beings that we are, right? Owning that there are things that we do to help people have more life, and just owning our abilities to do that unabashedly, right? Without shame, without guilt, without fear, because ultimately at the end of the day, like we're the ones that have to answer to ourselves. And that's the alignment. And I'm not saying do things that would hurt other people. I'm not there, but more of like, if you are in service to the world, and I'm not saying serve at the expense of yourself, but like if we're in our lane of genius, really, if we all did our 5%, not 105%, but if we all did our 5%, like that, like lane of genius that we were in, the world would be a completely different place.
It really would be.
And so really it's about owning it. You know, I'm going to start a movement where people, and I'm in the process of trademarking my book name that I'm writing called Own It. And it's really about how do we own that sovereignty. And I've had some clients get like tattoos on the inside of their arms that say own it, right? Just as a reminder to own how powerful. I mean, our minds are so powerful. You know, the gray matter that we have in our brain will die, but the essence of who we are, right? The spiritual part of us and the essence, that thinking part of us and the feeling part of us, like that is who we are. And we need to own that because our brains can create, like the essence of who we are can create our mind. Let's put it that way, not the brain, the mind. Our mind can create beyond imagine, both negatively and positively. When people say, I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop, I'm like, peace out, because that shoe is going to drop.
Yeah.
Because they're attracting it to themselves, right? That's just how powerful we are. And we're just as powerful. I mean, I have people tell me I look 10 years younger than I did 10 years ago. I mean, sure, it's healthy things that I'm doing, but it's because I have joy in my life. I'm doing those things that light me up. That's why I call my business what I call it, because the lit up life is about life is too short not to be lit up.
Ah, I can't wait
own
for your
it.
book.
Own who you are.
I think, and also what a flex when you have a movement when people are tattooing your phrase on their arm. That is incredible.
I need to go get one now. So
good. Yeah. Where's yours? Okay. So Debbie, thank you for joining me. I have loved this discussion and I know our audience is going to want to see more of you, hear more from you. How can they find you and how can they work with you?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So you can go out to my website. It's thelituplife.com. So lit is L-I-T, thelituplife.com. And I am a person that I just feel like everything needs to be out there. So any way that you could possibly interact with me is out there. There's links to Facebook. My name is Debbie Heiser. That's who I am on Facebook. Instagram, it's _lit-up-life. But that's the predominant places I'm at. I am in LinkedIn. I don't use that as frequently, but I'm out there. So yeah, and people can sign up to do a business strategy call with me. They can do what I call a next steps call to say, what is it that they want in their life? What is their next step? And then if it looks like it would be a match, I would talk to them about what it looks like to work with me. But all of my programs are out there. And I just love working with people of all different walks of life and all different desires that they have. It's just, I don't know. People are so interesting to me and I'm always super curious about their stories. So even if you just want to talk to me about your story, I would love that. So
thank you. And I'm also curious to know, I feel like I should know this already, so apologies. Do you have any books out already or is this going to be your first book? Books, you said you were doing fiction and non-fiction, right?
Yeah, it is going to be my first book. And so it was interesting when you said she's an author. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm like, no, I'm going to own that because I am. I'm in the process of writing that book. So I have a fiction book that I'm going to write. And that one I've been working on a little bit more. But the nonfiction book is about the work that I do. And the title of it will be Own It.
So good. I'm also excited for your fiction book. I was thinking to myself the other day, if I could find a list of authors who have written really good fiction, but they are also life coaches, because I feel like the psyche of the characters and the choices they make and the hero's journey will be so freaking good because you understand psychology, you understand the human brain. I think that would be, it's like if I could.
Well, and this one is
make a request
actually about and this one is actually about my story. And it's really my mama's heart. I have one son who's 33. And so my mom's heart wants my son to pick out what's true and what's fiction. Oh, okay. And it's about the relationship I had with his dad. I was married for almost 30 years and I was married to 7 men, but 1 man. So it's a little bit of mental health built in there. And I'm not going to give away what the premise and how the book will come together, but it is one that I'm already, my niece is in film school, a very prestigious film school here in California. And I've already talked to her and said, get on it. She'll be a junior next year. And I told her, I said, by the time it's published and out, this is either going to be a movie or a small miniseries on Netflix or something. So I said, be prepared. You're going to direct my movie. So
yes. Oh, so good. Okay. Well, in that case, I'm so glad I introduced you as an author because you absolutely are. Just reality needs to catch up. Get the book out already.
Exactly. I'm going to own it.
So good. Oh, thank you, Debbie. I've loved having you here today. And for everyone else listening, you can connect with me at coachingwithpamela.com. And again, you can find me in all the places. And if you love this episode, please give this a rating, some stars, whatever you're able to do in whichever platform you're listening. Do let us know how you found it or drop me a DM. But Debbie, thank you so much for joining me today. And everyone else, I'll see you in the next episode.